Hey everybody, Pesmerist here. Today we're going to take you on a tour of all the countries that Pez has been manufactured in over the years, at least the dispensers. The dispensers have been around since 1949, very late 40s. They started out with the first regulars, manufacturing those in Austria, as it's an Austrian country, and but they've manufactured their dispensers all over the world over the past several decades, and you'll find the dispenser stems marked with all different made in countries. And I think I've now got an example of each one good enough to show all the different countries that you might be able to find out there. This is the second time I'm going to replace the first video I shot because I didn't have a couple of these countries when I first shot them. And so just for historical posterity's sake, let's jump right into it and we can take a look at them because there's a lot of them. All right, so the first thing I want to mention is there are some dispensers that have no made in country marked on them. So these are going to be marked with patent only, and they're not going to have a country on there. So I've got this Jasmine here, pretty modern dispenser. You can see she's just marked with the patent. There's no made in country on either side. Got the IMC. So that's how collectors figure out which country it was likely made in based on the IMC or some other clues. But you can find vintage dispensers this way, modern ones. Really, I think the main market that requires Pez to mark them with the made in country is the US. So if they're not intending to sell the dispenser to the US, they'll skip putting the made in country on there sometimes. So this particular Jasmine I picked up in a box of dispensers I got from someone selling from Brazil and some, I guess, is in Latin America. Pez International doesn't even mark the dispensers with the made in country because they don't have to. So they just skip it. But that's not really what the topic is here. We're looking at the countries. Just be aware that you can certainly find Pez all along the timeline, maybe that isn't marked with any made in country at all. All right, so let's start with the first country that was manufacturing dispensers, and that, of course, is Austria. Started in 1949. They kept manufacturing the dispensers in Austria all the way to 1992. Just want to show an example here of one that's marked made in Austria, but it has no patent on this one. A few dispensers don't have a patent, not many. There was a period, this guy's thought to be probably in the mid 70s there, where they were between patents and they didn't put them on there. But there's a few other types of dispensers over the years that don't have a patent on them. Austria is one of the countries, there's a few different countries that sometimes would mark their dispensers with the made in country in ink. I think it's sort of an afterthought that maybe they initially were trying to sell this into the non-US market. So they just had the patent on here, no made in country. But then later, I guess they decided, well, can't get rid of them there, so let's send them to the US. And so they would mark them then made in Austria at that point. A few different countries have been known to do that over the years. So I'll show a few of them. All right, so the next country outside of Austria that they manufactured dispensers in appears to be Germany. 1953 to 55, post-World War II. You can find some irregulars that are marked made in Germany. Let's see, made in Germany, US zone. Um, yeah, for Germany, I think it was only these early years, and this was before they even were putting character heads on them, so they were only making these regulars. So that's all you'll find marked made in Germany. I don't think there's any exceptions to that rule. The common case is you'll find them marked with this US zone. But if you find one that doesn't have the US zone, well, you hit the jackpot because those are pretty super rare. A good condition US zone regular run you around 200 bucks, maybe a little more depending on the colors, things like that. But if you find one without the US zone marked on them, then you're looking at 10 times that, a couple $1,000s. So keep your eyes peeled for those for sure. All right, but yeah, as manufacturing Austria, short period there in Germany, and then really the very first factory to come up outside of Austria is either, and I don't know the order for these two for sure, but it's either going to be Yugoslavia or Hong Kong, right around 1970. it's a little hard to say, and I've gone back and forth trying to figure out which of these factories started up first. For a while, I thought it was Hong Kong because they used the DBP patent quite a bit. Um, the Indian chief, I'm pretty sure, was known to have started appearing in 1970. So probably these factories are there certainly by 70, definitely by 71. Um, but actually, it turns out Yugoslavia also used the DBP patent, and they were assigned IMC 5 ahead of Hong Kong, which got assigned 6 and 7. They must have two factories in Hong Kong. So I'm going to go back to believing that Yugoslavia maybe came first ahead of Hong Kong. But not certain about that, certainly questionable. So here's one of the early Yugoslavia stems, a 2.6 patent, made in Yugo, it's the double half flower one. Yugoslavia starts 1970. They kept manufacturing there till 92. Later, we'll see it change in 92, where you won't find the mark made in Yugoslavia anymore, but then they changed the country name. Yugoslavia is one of the few, one of the countries that you can also find them printed on their switch, made in Yugoslavia. All right. But then about the same time or shortly thereafter, we've got made in Hong Kong comes online. Manufactured in Hong Kong, it seems from around that 1970 point, all the way up till late 80s, 89 or so. So here's one of the early Hong Kong stems, also marked 2.6 patent in Hong Kong. Your Hong Kong Indian chief. Hong Kong is another interesting one because when they wanted to mark the dispensers, similar to Austria and Yugoslavia, to sell them in the US, sometimes, if they didn't originally mark them, they would just stick a little sticker on the bottom here. They would just say, made in Hong Kong. They've got a couple different types of stickers they did this with. That's the only factory I know of that used the sticker to mark their country of origin. I think I only ever seen those on Hong Kong, but certainly interesting little variation. I forgot to mention on Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia, obviously marked with a Y, most commonly, but sometimes you could find it marked made in Jugoslavia with a J instead of a Y, and that's not a typo. I think both spellings are considered correct. It probably depends whether you're, considering the name from the native language or the English language or something like that. But you can find that Yugoslavia is marked with a J, both footed and non-footed. So it didn't seem to be a timeline thing. They just kind of went back and forth, I think, on some manufacturing, and sometimes they called them made in Yugoslavia and sometimes Yugoslavia. The Jugo stuff is a little bit less common than the Yugo stuff, but it doesn't add a ton of value. All right, let's keep rolling along the timeline and move over to the next factory that we think came online. 1973 is what I've heard for the Spain stuff. So here we go. Focus there. Made in Spain. 73, the footless 3.9. They also came on 3.4 patents. That would certainly make sense around 73. Seems like they probably manufactured for a couple of years in the 70s there. It's not clear if it was contiguous or if they just kind of spotty manufactured in Spain and then stopped for a while and then restarted, because there's not a lot of dispensers that are found in Spain. So it's very unlikely they were manufacturing there for a long time, unless they were just making such little amounts of stuff. But you can also find some made in Spain stuff with footed stems, and feet didn't appear till the early mid 80s. So Spain must have been manufacturing also in the 80s, but it's hard to believe they'd be manufacturing that whole time from 73 to say 84, because there's just not enough stuff that people find made in Spain to believe that whole time they're manufacturing tons of dispensers. So Spain's a little bit of an odd enigma, but certainly started probably 73 seems accurate. All right, the next factory has spun up was good old Made in USA. Um, Vermont Ready Plastics, I think, was making the USA stuff in the mid 70s. Um, started Dispenser started appearing in 74, 75. Maybe the factory was being built in 74. The the year that I've heard is 74. But certainly by 1980, before 1980, they stopped manufacturing in the U.S. there. Um, so brief period, but definitely super collectible. Um, stem variations. There's a lot of collectors that like to focus on the made in the USA stuff, especially if you have the American collecting market. All right, so after Pez shut down that US factory, it seems like they were looking for some replacements, low cost manufacturing. And this is where I've got another one where I'm not sure which factory came up online next. It's either Mexico or Brazil about in the same time. Um, you can find trucks, both manufactured in Mexico and Brazil. And trucks, we believe, first got announced around 79, but maybe didn't hit the market till 1980. So thinking that these factories started shipping dispensers in 1980, and they didn't ship for very long. There's not a ton of either of these country stuff that you find out there. Maybe for a year or two at most, seems unlikely that they went on much longer than that. The Mexico stuff, I mean, is marked Hecho in Mexico. Look at that. You can see the little accent there that's sort of marked over the E. I guess Mexico. So you find the Mexico stuff like that marked with no patent sometimes, and then sometimes you can find the Mexico stuff marked with a patent on it there. So Hecho in Mexico, took away the little accent on this one, but then they've got the patent number 141242. All right. So the Mexico stuff, it's limited to Disney's and trucks. You don't find a ton of it. But then around that same time, we had some Brazil stuff that you could find. Now, the Brazil stuff's sort of interesting because they did mark some of their stems, their trucks and their Disneys. They would mark down at the bottom. The only one that would mark, well, other than those printed ones, they would mark Industria Brasileira, or whatever it is pronounced, down here at the bottom, outside the little pebbled field. But most of the stuff that, like the unlicensed stuff, and I think they also made PALs in Brazil. They just didn't mark them with anything. No patent, no country, there's no IMC. And the only other country that ever did that, that's known to do that, actually was the USA stuff a little bit. Most of their stuff in the USA was marked Made in USA, except supposedly there's a group of dispensers they would ship to the Canadian market and remove all the markings. And oddly enough, they would remove the IMC as well. I don't know why they would care to remove the IMC. So you have to use a little bit of context clues to figure out if you have a stem that has nothing all on there, no country patent, whether it's USA or Brazil. Usually the inner sleeve gives it away. The inner sleeves on the USA stuff is very specific and always kind of looks the same. The Brazil inner sleeves are going to be a little different, but the parts on the head can also give it away. The plastic itself is different. I've done a separate video on that, but the ready plastic stuff was a little bit, has a different feel to it, a little more matte finish to it than other dispensers, sort of unique, and then the colors are a little bit unique. So the Brazil stuff you have to sort of get a little bit educated on to be able to tell the difference. But there are some that are marked as made in Brazil. They're just extremely difficult to find out there. All right, again, short run in Brazil, short run in Mexico. Then the next factory that seemed to come up online was Hungary, and I chose Jack to represent Hungary. I thought that was pretty clever. It's 1991. Hungary factory comes online, and this is going to be the first factory that you see here that's marked as still current. So Pez is still manufacturing dispensers in Hungary to this day. Everything that all the character dispensers you find in Hungary are going to have feet. Feet were added in the mid 80s, except for the specialty stuff that's current that doesn't have feet, like trucks. They're not going to put feet on trucks. Also, the regular remakes, they don't put feet on those because they want them to look like the old regulars, and a few other, yeah, sort of special cases that don't have feet that might say made in Hungary, but mostly everything's going to be footed after this point. All right, so the next factory around the same time, and again, I'm maybe not certain whether Hungary came online before China. I thought it did, but I'm not 100% certain there. China comes online next. So they ended manufacturing Hong Kong around 89, 90 maybe. And then China spins up in 1991. It's their low cost Asian factory made in China. And they still manufacture in China today for sure. Yeah, so you can definitely find all kinds of the China stuff there. The next one is a little interesting note is going to be the Slovenia factory. And this is the carry-on from Yugoslavia, late 80s, early 90s. So that Central Eastern Europe is going through a bunch of political shakeups and the countries are changing. And Yugoslavia ceases to exist, I believe, and becomes Slovenia. So I think it's the same factory. Could be wrong there, but it's probably the same factory. They've just changed the designation now of the country that comes out of there. You're going to see that instead of marked made in Yugoslavia, now they're marked made in Slovenia. And they carried on there for quite a while till around 2004, manufacturing out of Slovenia. All right, so next guy, it's going to be 1993. This opens up another factory in Europe, Czechoslovakia. Well, this guy's a tough one to see because he gets marked really light on here. Let's see if we can focus. Let's see it. How do we go? I think you can make that out. That's a really light strike, but Czechoslovakia, probably the longest name you get on a Pez dispenser there. But maybe early 93 is a brief period where you'll find these dispensers marked with Czechoslovakia. Not too many of them because it was such a short run there. Brian has a video on the Czech stuff. Yeah, chicken egg. You get Muppets, I think maybe Flintstones can be marked Czechoslovakia. But very quickly after that, they've changed the name of the country. 1994, it starts marking their dispensers as the Czech Republic now instead of Czechoslovakia. So on this Gonzo, you can see it's marked Czech Republic. Not a lot shorter, but it's a little. Yeah, and they only manufactured there for a couple of years. And then it seems like that factory stopped. And the last new factory that we've had, final one that's currently still manufacturing, is Vietnam. So right around in the pandemic days, has opened a factory there in Vietnam to diversify their manufacturing. And that's all the different countries that we've got. All right, so as far as what's the really rare and valuable stuff, some things are rare but not necessarily valuable. Like I said, the Czechoslovakia stuff with the full Czechoslovakian name is sort of hard to find because there's just not a lot of dispensers on them, but they're not worth too much because they're pretty current. And you can find them if you go searching for them. But like I said, I think there's Muppets and Flintstones and those kind of things. So fun variation to search out, but not super valuable. Back, let's see, the USA stuff, semi-rare. I mean, you can find it. There's quite a bit of it out there. It's just that the demand is so high. There's a ton of collectors in the American collecting market that love to collect the USA stuff. So that's why those dispensers run a premium. Probably adds at least $50 to the stem. So if you had a regular Santa, it's like a $1 Santa. But if you had a USA Santa, it's a $50 Santa or so. Some of the other rare stuff, Germany for regulars, definitely harder to find than the Austria stuff. Yeah, like I was saying, A US zone Germany regular probably runs around $200. But if you find it without that US zone marking, you're looking at more like $2,000. So you hit the jackpot there. Anything else? Yeah, so Mexico stuff, it can be pretty hard to find. You can still find it. There's still people that, yeah, toy dealers and things that find new stuff out of Mexico. Tends to get found pretty beat up, but not as big of a demand. Maybe similar, maybe even less dispensers out of Mexico than USA, but less demand makes the similar prices. So you're still probably adding $50 to a stem. Um, if you've got a $20 practical pig, but you find him in Mexico, maybe he's a $75 practical pig. And then the Spain stuff is pretty hard to find, at least in the American collecting market. I think there's more of it in European collectors over there, but it can add a good $100, maybe even $200. Depends on the stem and the character um, when you're looking for the Spain stuff. But Spain can be, yeah, there's just not a ton of it out there, so it can be a tough one to go after. But I think the hardest of them all to find is really the Brazil stuff. I think just because Spain, there's European collectors that have some of it. But the Brazil stuff, I just don't think there's a huge collecting market in Latin America. So there's just not a lot of it. And the stuff that's out there gets sort of hoarded. So anyway, let's sweep through our chronological timeline one more time. We got Austria, Germany, Yugoslavia, Hong Kong, Spain and USA, Mexico, Brazil, Hungary, China, Slovenia, Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic, Vietnam. There you have it. Get out there and collect some pets from all around the world.